Hi, welcome to another edition of Encountering the Divine. I trust all is well with you. I pray that God would just bless our time together today as we dive again back into 1 Timothy. This time we're going to go to chapter 3, and we're talking about overseers. I recently came across a new survey by Gallup, and it was a little troubling to say the least. It talked about where pastors and church leaders stand in terms of their credibility. Number one on the credibility listing are nurses, and that's good. We love to know that our caregivers are highly ethical and have the greatest level of integrity. And medical doctors fall just under that at 62%. Which seems a little lower than I'd like to have them, but nevertheless, we have to come down to number 8 in the survey to find clergy, and we fall at a failing grade of 34%. Only 34% of people trust clergy to be highly ethically and morally of the highest level of integrity. You know, we're slightly better than bankers and real estate agents, and we're considerably better than lawyers, but we are falling fast. And that's a sad statistic. And I don't know about you, but I believe as church leaders and as those who have been trusted by the Spirit, we ought to do our best to bring that up a few notches in our era, in our time. The top reasons, of course, for those negative sentiments, some of them we can't change. There's a distaste in the Western society for many of the core values and beliefs of Christianity. However, the question that begs answering is, are we doing well in how we translate those beliefs and those foundational elements of our faith? The Apostle Paul talked about the importance of preaching Christ. And just today I read a headline of a pastor, a leading pastor in Africa, who is making the headlines not because he's preaching Christ, but because he's promoting anti-vaxxing. And I honestly must confess that I don't see anything in here that gives me the authority to stand in a pulpit and be an anti-vaxxer or a pro-vaxxer. It's just not on my list of duties and responsibilities. And we all have come through the era of the pandemic, and it was difficult to walk that era and to be people of integrity. And we all have our personal views and convictions around these areas. But I have to ask myself as a spiritual leader and pastor, do I really am I called by God and empowered by the Spirit to spend my time in the pulpit that God's entrusted me with, talking about these things? Is that what's leading to our lack of credibility among people today in our society? And I believe it is. And so I'm being honest and transparent with you in my discussion of my time that I spend with you on Encountering the Divine. But one of the greatest contributors to our low standing has to do with sexual abuse and moral failures of church leaders. Just a few years ago, I pastored a church that had been through a season of that and helped bring some healing to that congregation. There's also, the negative presence of church leaders on social media platforms, pastors who are consistently against something. And we find this often, that pastors constantly have to be against something to get a following. It's not really the responsibility of a pastor or the church to point out individual sins. It's our responsibility to point men and women to their Savior. And I emphasize that in my leadership and with my team, that come on, we ought to be focused on pointing people to Jesus. Then there's the ethical failures of pastors and leaders around the old area of financial integrity. Many have failed on this front. We have many mega pastors today, and not only mega pastors, who have resorts all around the world who seem to feel that they have the right and the entitlement to live at a much higher level than I believe that the the ministry entitles us to as servants, as people who are called to serve. Jesus said, I came not to be served, but I come to serve. You know, birds have nests, foxes have holes. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay down his head. You know, he lived among the homeless. Now, I'm not advocating that we as pastors and spiritual leaders all sell our homes and give up everything we have and go live among the homeless, although it might do us some good to spend some time with them. And how we invest our finances that have been entrusted to us. It's being looked at in the world, in the society, and the culture to which we're ministering. You know, members of the clergy were in 1977 when Gallup began this whole process of measuring the integrity level of pastors in the greater community and how people looked at us. We were among the top of professions in 1977. And then we began this steady decline, and we fell dramatically in the late 1900s with some church scandals. And then we began to regain a little, but then since 2012 we began to plummet. And so it's something that begs some evaluation. And the Apostle Paul, it's amazing, but he really sought to get ahead of that. And so as we dive in to 1 Timothy chapter 3, we pick up on this very subject, this whole idea of church leaders' integrity and their level of integrity and how they stand in the community and how the community perceives them and evaluates them. Now, I will not compromise on biblical truths so that people will give me higher evaluation. No. That's never in question with me. This is my source. But I believe I have a responsibility under God to determine the best way to present the truths of this word in the most palatable means possible. To take the edge off where I can in my presentation so that I can welcome or invite people into the conversation around Christ, rather than setting out with all the I don'ts and just highlighting all the things I'm against in society as a starting point. It doesn't create a great atmosphere around the table. I mean, if you're needing to deal with some difficult topics, even as a family, as a church leader with your team, you always want to start with a positive note, with a hopeful conversation. And I believe we need to do that. Let's pick up here in 1 Timothy chapter 3. And we're just going to look at the first 7 verses today. Here's a trustworthy saying: whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now, the episkopos, or the overseer, the bishop, is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him. He must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. Quite a challenge. Paul begins by saying, here's a trustworthy saying: whoever aspires to be an overseer, and he used apokolos, this Greek word that refers to bishop, overseer, elder, and he's saying that person desires a noble task. You're to be commended for desiring to be in leadership role in the church. And so, first of all, Paul lays that down. He's commending people for that. Now, we get this whole idea, okay, so what's the term bishop? What does it mean? For some of us, in my tradition, the evangelical tradition, generally the term bishop is rarely ever used. But in the scriptures here, we find that this is used interchangeably. We have bishops, elders, overseers. It's referring to the same general office. In our current church environment, the pastoral role often involves significant governance, administration, as well as spiritual oversight responsibilities. Pastors oftentimes spend more time in administration, sometimes in governance, than they want to. But it's a part of the way things have evolved in our particular environment, depending on what your role is in the church. In the early church, bishops and elders and overseers focused mainly on teaching, leading worship, guiding the spiritual and the moral life of the congregation. Today, these structures, as I began to say, have changed somewhat. And so if you're coming from a Roman Catholic or Anglican or Orthodox church tradition, you know the term bishop holds a significant priestly position. So he's responsible for overseeing the diocese, which is a collection of parishes in a particular geographic area. The bishop ordains priests and deacons and administers sacraments and maintains church discipline and doctrinal purity within that diocese. If you come from a Methodist or a Lutheran denomination, much of the same. However, their responsibilities often include appointing pastors to local congregations, presiding over annual and general conferences, and guiding the general spiritual and organizational direction of the church. Now, in my particular context, the Pentecostal Assemblies of Canada, being a part of a Pentecostal or evangelical group of churches, and even within the non-denominational churches, the term bishop is probably less commonly used. However, when it is, it often refers to senior pastors or church leaders or oversee a particular church or group of churches. The emphasis mainly being more on spiritual leadership and on teaching and preaching and evangelism than on authority. Here in 1 Timothy chapter 3, the term episkopos or elder bishop is used. Now, I want to take a leap over to another portion of Scripture and bring another text to conjoin with this text, and that's found in Titus. Let's go to Titus, and let's go to just Titus chapter 1 and verses 6 to 9. Let's read together. An episkopos, or elder bishop, must be blameless, faithful to his wife, a man whose children believe and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. Since an episkopos, or overseer bishop, manages God's household, he must be blameless, not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain. Rather, he must be hospitable, one who loves what is good, who is self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firmly to the trustworthy message that it has been taught, as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it. Paul wrote the same basic instructions to Titus as he wrote to Timothy. And so let's just look at these four arenas that are addressed in both these texts. The first arena is one of personal character. Then we have family management, doctrinal soundness, and finally, public reputation. And this is not just a legalistic checklist. The idea here is not, bringing a burden on the leader and sort of putting him into a Pharisaic mode of functioning. No. Paul's establishing a framework, a comprehensive framework for evaluating individual spiritual maturity and leadership capabilities within the church. He's saying it's not that, there's different degrees of honor necessarily, although that's probably associated with it to some degree. It's not that there are different classes within the church, but there are different levels of maturity as people are growing in the grace and the knowledge of Christ. And then there's all the personality characteristics that gifts people and sets them apart for different roles. And so when you're trying to evaluate who is capable, who is probably qualified and rightly set apart for these roles. This is the template, if you would, that you need to use to help you determine who can come to that office in your local church setting. So first, this is the whole idea of personal character. Above reproach, that means someone must be perfect? Well, if that's the case, probably all of us would just be disqualified. It's someone of unimpeachable character, someone who's, we all may have accusations made about us, but, it's just this whole idea, you throw the mud to the wall, and sometimes some things stick. And we hope that most of the accusations that are thrown at us will not stick. Generally, it sets a tone of moral and ethical integrity. That person is a person who has high standards and seeks to live out those high standards. Albeit, let's take the perfection expectation off the table. A person is temperate. Temperate, that term means they're self-controlled, they're disciplined. If you look at their lives, the way they live their life has some order and some structure to it, and they maintain consistency. And these qualities suggest that the person is wise, they're mature, they're not given to inconsistent behavior. One day you can trust them, and the next day you cannot trust them. One day you can sit and have a very intelligent and meaningful conversation around things that are very controversial and very difficult, and the next day they're totally unpredictable. That would disqualify you. They're not given to drunkenness. Now, this speaks to us about, in today's society where we not only have alcohol, but we have other substances, whether it be, legal drugs or whether it be illegal drugs, or in certain cases now in our culture, some drugs that were once illegal are now being made legal. So it's not only referring to alcohol, but, does that mean that someone should never touch a drop of alcohol? I have to leave that for you as an individual church leadership to determine. In my particular context, we advocate for leaders not to use alcohol at all, to abstain from it. It doesn't mean that an occasional glass of wine would disqualify you necessarily, but there's a strong emphasis within our context to avoid alcohol because of the ills and the dangers associated with it. So, these are the personal character issues. There's also this idea of not being violent, but being gentle, not quarrelsome. An overseer must be one who seeks peace, not quick to get angry. Some people, their anger temperature just goes through the roof in a nanosecond. It's just anything sets them off. No, a person who's called to a leadership role must be a person who can control their emotions. They must not be contentious. They have to have a calm and gentle demeanor that will help them, mitigate difficult circumstances and bring peace and order where there's disorder. They're not a lover of money. It doesn't mean they won't have some value for money. It doesn't mean that they won't, have some good things around them, or drive a nice car, or live in a nice home, or enjoy a nice vacation. But it means that money is certainly not their number one primary goal and achievement in life. Secondly, this idea of family management. It doesn't mean your children will be perfect, that your wife or your husband will be perfect, that you just have this wonderful, perfect family where everyone is just moving along in absolute accord all the time. That's not a realistic world. We live in a challenging world, and our children and our spouses will go through seasons of challenge. But it speaks here to a person being a person who's loyal to their family. They reflect commitment and reliability. They're faithful to their spouse. They honor and serve their spouse with integrity. They manage their own family well. Their children honor them and respect them, even when they have to make difficult decisions, and even when their children are probably living through some rebellious seasons. Yet there will be honor in that relationship. And my Rhoda and I, we've lived through some of that with raising our own children. Times when they were all in step with us, and other times when they've been just a little out of step with us. And but you continue to invest and to love and to pour into and to earn their respect. Then there's this whole idea of doctrinal soundness. And here Paul says the person who's determined to be an elder or leader in the church must be doctrinally sound. They must make this word must be center in their lives. They must value it, and they must encourage others to seek the truth that's in it, and they seek to live out that truth. And refute those, as he said to Titus in 1 and 9, refute those who oppose it, who undermine the truth of this word. And that's not getting caught up in the little nuances of the scriptures, but certainly on core doctrine, they need to have a level head and be able to teach it properly. And so this will help the church maintain its foundational beliefs and its anchor. And then there's this idea of the community reputation. A leader needs to be thought well of by those on the outside. If we are going to have credibility within the city that we are ministering, then the leadership of our churches must be men and women of integrity, and they must be looked upon as men and women who are trustworthy. And so the overseer's reputation outside of the church and in the community, and the way they do their business in the community, the way they do their business in their workplace, how they serve as employees or employers, that's just as important as how they carry out life within the church. You don't check out, hang your church leadership hat on a hook as you leave your church and then go out into the world and live differently. No, there must be an alignment in your life inside and outside the church. And so this helps safeguard the church's reputation, and by extension, its mission and its effectiveness in the community that you serve. Not to be a recent convert. And here, this whole idea is that when people come into church leadership, we find this sometimes with really young pastors. Oftentimes kids come out of college or out of school, they go right into college, Bible college, they come right into the pastorate where they're giving leadership levels. And we find so much burnout and dropout in the early years of ministry. And I believe in some cases it's because we have put leaders who are not yet tested and tried in roles that are probably just a little above them. And so they need that season. It's the same in churches where we're bringing people in who just came to Christ. Let's let them mature a little. It doesn't mean we do not give them assignment. No, we should assign them to something as quickly as possible. But let's walk with them. Let's mentor them. Let's be alongside them. Let's come alongside them. Let's help them grow before we give them roles of authority. It allows time for growth in a person's faith and in their character. And so, in wrapping up, the old idea here is, it's not, as I said, a checklist of boxes that you've got to check off. No, the idea here, to place emphasis on character and reputation when choosing leadership in the church, is so that it prevents scandal. Leaders with flawed character can bring scandal to the church and damage its witness. And many churches don't exist today because of that. It promotes trust. Leaders of good character and reputation engender trust among church members. And that's essential again for effective leadership. It's to model Christ-like behavior. Leaders are seen as role models, people who pattern their life and their ministry after Christ. And it's to ensure sound teaching so that the church is grounded in sound doctrine in unstable times. So, quite a lot to unpack here in 1 Timothy chapter 3. And just the first 7 verses, of course, bringing into it Titus as well. And so I trust that this has given you a little more insight into the role of leadership in the church. And for those of you who are in leadership, I pray God would continue to bless you and keep you safe and keep you as a man or a woman of character and integrity so that you will help advance the cause of Christ in a very challenging and trying time. May God bless you until we come together again and we look at the role of the deacon in the local church. God bless you.